When Tony Ferguson lost to Justin Gaethje, I wasn't surprised at the outcome of the fight because I knew it could go either way, but I was surprised at how dominant Gaethje looked. No one has ever dominated Tony Ferguson that way, but I told myself, it's one setback, but with one good win, he'd be right back in title contention where he deserves to be. Then when they booked the fight with Oliveira, I knew it would be dangerous for Tony, I knew he could lose, but again, I didn't see him getting totally dominated in that fight, and I damn sure didn't see Oliveira out-wrestling him for 3 rounds. But still, I maintained hope. I was still optimistic that with a couple of good wins, Tony would be right back in title contention where, in my mind, he deserves to be. Now, maybe at the time, if I didn't see the writing on the wall, that was just my inner Tony fan speaking, but my optimism was slowly being chipped away because when they booked his most recent fight against Beneil Dariush, I felt confident Dariush would win in the exact manner in which he won, taking him down and using his wrestling to dominate all 3 rounds. As for the fight, I thought it was good, at least the first 2 rounds. Beneil was constantly advancing his position on top, constantly landing strikes and going for submissions, and in the second round he caught Tony in a heel hook which would have definitely made any other fighter tap out had they been caught in that same submission. Tony's face said it all. He was grimacing and it was very hard to watch, and I'm pretty sure he has some torn ligaments or tendons in his knees or some kind of injury. And that was especially obvious in the 3rd round when Tony Ferguson could barely put weight on it and couldn't use his footwork and his knee kept buckling, so you know something was structurally wrong with it. Now, Dana White had some criticism for Beneil Dariush, saying that he didn't do himself any favors with his performance, and I would push back against that statement a little bit because I thought he looked great in the first 2 rounds, but I would agree with that statement for his performance in the 3rd and final round of the fight. The 3rd round is where Beneil Dariush did the least in the fight when he should have been doing the most. Tony Ferguson was tired, he was moving slower, and he couldn't even put weight on his knee without it buckling, and for some reason Beneil Dariush plays it super safe in the 3rd round and just holds Tony down to ride out the clock. Now, I understand the necessity of a fighter doing everything he can to guarantee victory, but I believe if your opponent is that compromised, you don't slow down, you speed up. The first 2 rounds, when he's most fresh and most dangerous, you do more damage. Then when he can barely stand, you decide to do nothing. Even if Dariush couldn't get the finish on Tony Ferguson, if he kept the fight on the feet and kept lighting him up and it went to a decision, that might have been more appreciated by the audience, but especially the UFC. Dana White has made it very clear over the years that he doesn't like when guys play it safe. Like on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender series, there was a guy who won his fight, but Dana felt he was playing it safe by going for a takedown, so he didn't get a UFC contract even though he won his fight. Now, one thing I didn't like during the fight was Daniel Cormier's commentary. While the fight was happening, he was basically calling Tony Ferguson done, saying it's over for him, and I wouldn't disagree with this statement, but is this something that you want to say at the desk while you're doing the commentary on the fight? And then he brought up how Tyron Woodley is no longer in the UFC and how Jacare has been losing. And the point he was making was this is a young man's sport, and we're seeing how these guys who used to be monsters in their division are now losing to old age. It's not an incorrect statement, but it felt inappropriate at the moment. But during the commentary, Dean Thomas made an excellent point, and it was something that I'd never considered. He mentioned that when Tony Ferguson was younger, he was able to use his unpredictability and unorthodox style to beat his opponents, but he was always deficient in fundamentals. Now that he's older, he's no longer physically able to be as unpredictable and athletic as he once was, so he has to rely on his fundamentals to win his fights, and since those fundamental techniques were not the best to begin with, it's starting to show where he was lacking. I thought that was a great point, and I think another fighter who this can apply to is Jon Jones. 10 years ago, he was throwing spinning elbows, spinning back kicks, flying knees, suplexes, and now he doesn't do any of that. And his last few fights have been extremely close, so it would seem that's because he also can no longer do the same unpredictable moves at this age and has to rely on fundamentals that also might be deficient in some areas. As for Tony Ferguson, if he doesn't win his next fight, I think he should retire. Some people are saying he should retire right now, but I'm willing to see at least one more fight before I put the nail in the coffin. The only thing that bothers me is he never got a chance to fight for the real belt. I think he got screwed in that area. Think about this. He won his interim title against Kevin Lee and didn't get a chance to fight for the belt. He won 2 more fights after being the interim champ and still wasn't given his title shot. They made him fight Gaethje, and that winner would then fight Khabib. Sure, he agreed to it, but they weren't going to give him a title shot that he earned anyway. And now that he's on losing streak, they have a legitimate excuse not to give him a title shot. I'm just glad they didn't deny Charles Oliveira his title shot that he earned. I was afraid they would do that because there were conversations about Conor fighting Dustin for the belt, which would be ridiculous because Conor hasn't won a fight at lightweight since 2016. And then there were talks about Chandler fighting Dustin for the belt, which again would be ridiculous because Chandler only had 1 fight in the UFC, and there is no way on God's green earth that he should earn the belt over Oliveira, who was on an 8-fight winning streak. But they made Oliveira versus Chandler, which I'm perfectly fine with since Dustin chose to rematch Conor, and there really isn't any other big names at lightweight who could be put opposite Oliveira. So I'm glad they gave Oliveira his shot, and I'm glad he won because he was kind of up and down in his career, win some, lose some, but then 3 years ago he hit his stride and just been on a winning streak since then. So it's nice to see him get the belt after 10 years in the UFC. Anyway guys, that's all I had to say about that. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.